Your moment has finally arrived. Yeah, you've girded your loins, you got your squad together, you found that boss, and yeah, it's time to whoop that ass. But just a couple rounds in, you start to realize,
hold up, wait a minute, something ain't right.
Your triple quadruple hurricane attack hit nada, your strongest smite didn't even tickle him, you're absolutely trumping your mental spells, no legendary actions required, and your cleric goes down in one hit, oh no, and now it's time to retreat. Or maybe you're that GM who just struggles with running a boss that's way too easy, leaving you feeling dissatisfied by the end. You want to crank up that tension and lay a solid smackdown, but you don't know how to make a god tier villain that's still fun and fair to play against. Well, in either case, the Brewmaster's got you covered. So if you want to kill that unkillable boss, or if you're that GM who wants to run an unstoppable force of nature, then shut up and listen. Because today we're going to be learning from the Clan of the White Lotus, one of the most iconic kung fu films ever to be released, and for good reason. If you have not watched these films, then I highly suggest it both as a dungeon master and a player, because they are a treasure trove of interesting ideas, especially for fighters and monks. So, the most important thing, and why we're starting here, is getting in the player's minds, because first impressions really are everything. Before your PCs ever fight your boss, there should be an aura of invincibility around them that'll terrify your players. But to achieve this effect, we have to start working before the players ever really see your main villain, and the first step is build up. The best way, or maybe just the easiest way, to tell things apart is by contrasting them. So you'll want to provide some sort of baseline to compare your villain against. You'll watch my video on season 1 if you want some more details on that. But the gist is that the PCs defeat an underboss toward the beginning of the campaign, and it's a really hard fight. So that way when they fight your main villain, that villain seems even stronger by comparison. But there is just one thing that's as important as being strong, and that's looking strong. Now, this is hard to quantify because some villains just have that thing, you know? As soon as you see them, it's just like, holy shit, do we even want to fight this guy? And if you can achieve that, then you've won 3/4 of the mental battle, and that is a successful reveal. Now, in the movie, the first time we see the Lotus Chief show up, the first thing we see him do is this. Now, I don't know about you, but that's just some of the coldest shit. Like, at this point, the PCs have killed a whole bunch of his men, and he just shows up and... like, does this man look at all concerned to you? Like, if you tried to measure his swag in this moment, your scouter would just blow up and it would shatter into a million pieces. And I personally find the most intimidating villains to be those that are calm and calculating with their evil, or those that are completely unpredictable due to some mental or emotional instability. And what further adds to the Lotus Chief's intimidation factor are his motives. Like, he's here for the main characters personally. Like, he knows them by name.
Up yo, Home Whiting. My whole purpose here is to kill you both and wipe out the whole lot of your Shaolin clan.
That means there's no choice but to fight this guy eventually. He's just gonna keep coming until they're dead. Sidebar. I love making the villain's hatred toward the PCs the result of something that the PCs actually did.
You bastard. We Shaolins never hurt your clan. Why do you want to fight us?
I want revenge. You both killed my classmate, Pame the priest.
So GMs, pay attention to those things that the players do that can come back to haunt them, and players, be careful of the skeletons that you do leave behind, because if you do have a good GM, your story is going to respond to the decisions that you make, good and bad.
Addendum.
Another golden thing about this film is that it ain't too complex. Maybe I'm just getting tired of the overblown, bloated, convoluted storytelling and a lot of media nowadays, but there's something to be said for just keeping it simple. Here we have a very simple revenge plot. You know, you kill my uncle, I kill your brother, you kill my clan, I kill your clan. It's refreshing. And that's not to say that your plot of your villain has to be so simple. But here's a good rule of thumb. If your villain can't turn their big bad plot into a sales pitch, then it's probably way too complicated. So go back to season 1 and watch my video on villains for more tips, and just try to keep in mind that a lack of build up to your villain just leads to a disappointing climax. So now we've built up our boss, we've revealed him. Now it's time to drive the message home with a display of power. When your big bad evil guy actually steps onto the playing field, then you should probably provide a little bit more context to their power of level. And there's no better way of doing this than to having your boss whooping NPCs ass, just trashing them. They should be terrifying. But their godlike powers should come as no shock or surprise to your players. Now in the film, we see the Lotus Chief first use his powers on non-essential characters, multiple times. His palm strike almost instantly kills with bleeding from your orifices. Now this is an absolutely brutal power to have as a boss. There's even a point where he critically misses his attack and kills his own minion, again demonstrating the terrifying technique. Your players should definitely see these abilities in a fight before they actually have to fight them, so that way they can decide whether or not they even want that smoke. This technique is called telegraphing, and unlike a real fight, you actually want to do this in tabletop RPG. Players, be on the lookout for these telegraphs. If your GM is any good, they will be signaling these strong abilities before you encounter them in full. And GMs, please just do not outright kill your PCs and they don't even know to expect that kind of danger. Like that might work in video games like Dark Souls, but in a tabletop RPG, you don't just respawn with the same character. Unless you do. Now, I'm currently running a campaign where dying has a mechanical effect on character progression and alters the story depending on how many times you die. So if you guys want a video on integrating PC death into core gameplay mechanics, then just let me know in the comments. But yeah, don't be that GM who's all like, well, realistically, the boss would hide his powers and surprise his enemies. Like, that may be realistic, but tabletop RPGs, no matter how immersive we make them, are not real life. They're just games. And the game's primary function is to be fun. And tabletop RPGs have the added function of storytelling. But if you insta-kill your PCs, not only are you killing them, but you're definitely killing the fun and possibly your story too. So, telegraph. Good players will pick up on that and it'll smoothen things out on both sides of the screen. And when you see those telegraphs as a player, take them seriously and be honest. The boss punches a guy and he explodes. Okay, do I, given my abilities in this time and moment, have what it takes to survive an attack like that? And if the answer is no, then retreat. But let's say that you do get into combat, or your GM and your PC is getting into combat, and from your side of the screen, you can tell that they are not gonna win that fight yet. Then make that clear by your descriptions. From a mechanical standpoint, I would stack my boss with all of, resistances, immunities, all that kind of stuff. And that'll balance out later with some other mechanics that I'll teach you later in this video, so stay tuned. But for now, we want that air of invulnerability. So when the player lands an attack, I would describe it as barely tickling, regardless of how much damage it actually does. And if the PC misses an attack, I'd actually still describe that as a hit. Just one that deals no damage whatsoever. And this has a triple function. Most importantly, it cloaks your boss's armor class or their defense stats from those perceptive players who can reverse engineer the math to figure out the boss's stats. You know who you are. This way, they roll up 25, it's a hit. They roll up 5, it's a hit. What's the boss's armor class? You tell me. 2, it makes the boss seem intimidating. And 3, it takes the sting out of missing so many attacks. PCs are rolling like absolute shit. Then this tactic makes it so that your player doesn't feel so useless. But maybe you want them to feel useless against your boss. On one hand, you can make your boss seem invincible by having them relatively easy to hit, but taking little to no damage from those hits. On the other end of that spectrum though, you can have it so that your boss really can't be hit at all. Like maybe they're a ghost, maybe they're intangible, maybe their armor class or defense is just so high that it has to be lowered before the PCs can reliably land that blow. And here's an idea. Crit immunity. Let the players roll that nat 20 and realize that the boss just ate their best shot, no problem. Playing with these crit ranges in general can make a boss just seem real scary, like maybe they're immune to crits, or maybe they just crit on a much higher chance. Maybe the boss simply has a power that just neutralizes the ability that your PCs rely on all the time, taking away their trump card. Now, the goal with this isn't to take your PCs out of the fight. It would be to get them or nudge them to think outside the box. So players, be wary that the villain is likely to be well defended against whatever it is that you do best. And that protection can take many forms. Maybe the villain can only be hurt by magic or non-magic. Maybe it can only be hurt by magic of a certain level. Maybe a specific item is needed to combat this particular monster, creature, whatever.
Rings of garlic, holy water, silver steak.
During the campaign, be on the lookout for chances to train and gain more skills outside of what's explicitly prescribed by your class. Maybe you pick up a sword style here, learn a simple spell there, engage with the side quests though, because all the little knickknacks that you earn will help you diversify. Because whatever boss you face, you should expect that simply running up and attacking 6 times just ain't gonna cut it. And in those moments, GM, when your PCs are throwing themselves up against that wall and they're having a hard time trying to figure out what works and what doesn't, it's in those moments that your big bad evil guy should be an absolute bastard. Because another major piece of giving your villain that presence is smack talk.
A bunch of amateurs and useless.
This goes along with their display of power, because in my opinion, a good boss should never be above taunting, gloating, shit talking.
How dare you challenge me with your so-called kung fu? You don't have a chance.
They should be spitting straight flames the entire fight.
I can handle all of you without using weapons.
Even if your boss is a stoic philosopher, after a couple rounds of combat, they should be giving their verbal jabs. They should be getting those hits in. Even if it's just one word.
Pathetic.
That villain should be demeaning the PCs for even trying it. Like, you gonna come up in here, in my house, and miss 5 straight attacks against me?
What?
And don't be afraid to get savage, because any good villain is gonna know that it's in their own best interest to anger their opponents.
This is no fun anymore. You must be out of your mind to fight me. With your childish tiger crane skill.
Did he just say what I thought he said? What?
But by the same token, if the PCs have fought your boss before, then your boss should remark on the improvements that the characters have made.
I can see you've been practicing crane style.
This lets them feel like they've accomplished something and that the world is reacting to them. But again, your boss is unimpressed by that. And if your villain outclasses your PCs by a huge margin, then let the boss toy with them. Your villain might be haughty. Maybe they just enjoy the thrill of the battle. Sidebar. The number one reason players die at my table is simply by not reading the signs, of which there are always many. If you get the hints that the boss is just way too powerful, they're eating your critical hits, your attacks aren't doing anything, they're gloating, they're laughing, they're toying with you, it may be just the dice swing drastically against you, and it's not even anything you're doing wrong, it's just circumstance. Retreat. Live to fight another day. Most GMs are pretty lenient with allowing their PCs to run away from situations that are just too much for them. So just remember what's at stake. You probably spent hours making your character, spent dozens more hours playing your character, so guard yourself. Provided that your quest allows you the time, there's nothing wrong with retreating, getting some more XP, and coming back when you're a little bit more swole. So we want to show, as a GM, how deadly our boss's powers are by using them on the NPCs. And we want the PCs to know what they're in for, but we don't want to wipe them out, right? And this leads right into the next thing, which is the real big elephant in the room when it comes to tabletop RPGs, which is plot armor. What is it and why is it? Well, I define it as the moment that your PC should definitely die, but they don't for some circumstance that's completely outside of their control. And we see this all the time in all different types of media. We have the obviously bad plot armor, such as the infamous refrigerator from Indiana Jones and the Crystal Skull. And then we have good plot armor, like episode 5, where Luke should definitely be killed by Vader, but just isn't because that's his pops. Now, the difference is that the Crystal Skull simply uses contrivance to keep Indy alive. But episode 5 uses Luke's near-death moment to advance the plot in a stellar way.
I am your father.
All of mankind can unanimously agree that this moment is infinitely more interesting than if Luke had just died here. So, do your PCs have plot armor? Should they? Well, you tell me down in the comments what you think, because this debate gets real heated in the TTRPG community. My personal stance is that plot armor is okay when it is. Plot armor can be fine when it doesn't diminish the player's sacrifices or choices up until that point, or in other words, if it's not contrived. So no Deus Ex Machina, but a good use of plot armor is going to find a very interesting and plausible alternative to death for when the PC's HP reaches 0. And in a campaign where you're building an invincible boss, you're definitely gonna want to have a couple alternatives to death for when that time inevitably comes. And here are some alternatives to PC death that can keep your story and your PC alive while keeping things interesting. But the real trick is knowing when it's okay. So here are my golden rules for when it's okay to use plot armor. 1. Only use it on a rare occasion when the alternative is more dramatic than a dramatic death, which is almost never. 2. Only use it when it advances the main plot or develops a PC's personal goal in some way. 3. And this is the most important, I think. It must introduce a complication. This cannot be a get out of jail free card. Yeah, you survive, but you wake up captured. Yeah, you survive, but you're displayed on the side of the road naked with a sign over your head saying, this is what happens to anybody who dares, confront the Dark Lord. Yeah, sure, you survive, but you wake up completely stripped of all of your items. It cannot be a get out of jail free card. It has to be a way that pushes the story forward and that advances and complicates the situations that the PCs are in. And 4, you can't do this any more than 2 to 3 times. I mean, really just 2 times, just twice a campaign. So, plot armor, keep it light. If you're using it, make sure it's cloth, not plate. Some things really are worse than death, and if done right, your players won't even consider their plot armor as such. Now, in the film, our protagonist escapes the Lotus Chief 3 times. Each time is for reasons that are completely plausible given what's happening in the moment. And true masters of the dungeon will know that if you really want to punish PC's failure, then you leave the PCs alive. You kill what they love instead. Have a love interest or a family member jump in the way of a killing blow, or have them lose a precious item. Or maybe the villain lets the PCs go because they want the PCs to get stronger so they can be more of a challenge later. At one point, the Lotus Chief lets the main character go out of sheer hubris.
Pity. We didn't kill Hung Wei Ting.
Don't you worry. With Uphill dead, he's no threat to us.
But it costs him his entire clan. Like, everybody dies, even his best friend. Now his life is infinitely more complicated because he has to take care of his defenseless and pregnant sister-in-law at the same time as trying to escape the Lotus clan as they hunt down the rest of them. That's plot armor done right. At another point, he's beaten, but allowed to escape so that he can be followed back to his home base so that all of them can be killed.
But let him go.
Uncle.
You go find their hideout.
So as a player who's dealing with an overpowered enemy, keep in mind that there is more at stake than just your own character's life. And when you face such a boss, expect death, but not necessarily your own. And if you do escape, you should always be paranoid that that was according to the boss's plan. And the key to survival in a situation like that isn't just asking for perception checks or insight checks, but it's really describing how you're looking out, being wary of being followed. Are there any locations, such as a market, where you might lose a tail? Describe taking steps to avoid being tracked and even try to turn the tables on your stalker or stalkers if you do detect them. And GMs, be open to your players' suggestions and give them a chance to roll those dice to avoid danger, especially if you know something real nasty is looking for them. So, at this point, with all of these resistances, immunities, and powers, you must be thinking, how can I beat a boss like this? Well, let's talk strategy. Teamwork. Now, I know that this is going to seem obvious, but it's true. Teamwork really does make the dream work. And I'm not just talking about everybody piling up on the same villain. We're talking about actual synergy between players. Like, do you know how your character's build interacts with the other character's builds? What powers do you have that help or hinder their abilities? Knowing this will help you avoid jamming each other up. And you'll no doubt discover some cool combos too that you all can pull off together. Powers that you can layer, effects that you can stack, or powers that just make it easier for a teammate to land a hit may be the difference between victory and defeat. And GMs, I suggest even letting your PCs take their turns together sometimes under certain circumstances. Like maybe there could be a reward for rolling a nat 20 initiative, or it could be a bonus that they get because their enemies rolled a nat 1. And don't be afraid to homebrew some cool team moves for your PCs to pull off, especially the marshals, so that they can get into that cool double team action that we see so often in all types of films. And teamwork extends even beyond your party, because if you're facing an invincible villain, then you'll definitely need to gather allies. Now, these people may not come to the battlefield with you, of course, but they still provide key support for your cause and can help bolster you by supplying gear, lore, or even special training. These NPCs should all be invested in seeing the big bad evil guy taken out for their own personal reasons, but that shouldn't overshadow your PCs. They're here to support the party and also for mood control. Sidebar, you can control the tone and the mood of your session by having the PCs of a desired tone interact with your party. So if the tone or the session, is drab, you can have a more comedic NPC come in and vice versa. If things are way too silly, you can have a more serious NPC come in and kind of temper that tone. I would say that trying to introduce humor to a tense moment is a bad idea, so try to avoid that because that can shatter tension and immersion with tonal dissonance, which is something that lots of games and movies and shows suffer from nowadays. Under certain circumstances with some dark humor, like if you're playing Fallout or something like that, it can work. But on the whole, I recommend keeping the comedy in your campaign strictly segregated from the serious moments. Allies can also provide things like, shelter, food, or information for the big bad evil guy and for the in-world setting.
You'll never succeed if you just practice speed. Here's a special technique.
What technique?
Go bring me a dummy, and I'll show you.
And GMs, consider offering class feats from other classes that aren't being currently played in your campaign as something that the players can work toward. Now, this isn't just a giveaway. These powers can only be taught by an ally and learned through intensive training. How do you beat an unbeatable boss?
You must train.
As a player, you should always be looking for ways and moments to master your specialties and learn new abilities outside of just basic leveling. And for GMs, training can be a downtime activity, or you can even bake it into the process of leveling itself, whereas training is the method by which they do level up. In any case, the difficulty of this training should be reflected by how long it takes to complete it, from hours to years. In this film, the main character's training occurs over the course of almost 2 years. So GMs, don't be afraid to have that time stretch out a little bit between adventures. This leaves plenty of time for downtime. A drawn out passage of time actually can also help convey that mood of the medieval setting where time was a little bit more slow, or even of a realistic sci-fi setting where space travel can take many, many years. Well, that is the time where you train. And in the movie, we see our hero training year round, and his nephew actually grows up over the course of the film, showing that passage of time. This is also the time for your party to reflect on their defeat and to learn how to better face the boss next time. At this point, we're assuming that your boss has already defeated the party at least once. And in the film, each time the hero gets defeated, he escapes back to his hideout and uses downtime to learn how to weaponize some new bit of information that he learned by losing to the boss last time. This happens 3 times in our film. Now, at first, he has to learn a new style to get faster and stronger, but that's not good enough because he can't actually touch the boss. So then he has to learn how to fight gently as well as with power, but even that's not enough. It's not until after his 3rd defeat with the boss that he has enough experience to master the skills to use the pressure point technique that he does eventually use to kill the boss at the end. But that style combines everything that he's learned up until that point, such that each defeat up until that point has served as a narrative beat, each moment imparting a key piece of vital information, like pieces to a puzzle. And when those puzzle pieces are assembled, they reveal what I call vital flaws. Now, this is the thing that when your PCs exploit it, it's going to shift the fight heavily in their favor, no matter how invincible your boss is. These flaws can take a variety of forms, and it can be fairly straightforward, like the PCs just having to destroy an item or destroy a certain body part before they can hurt the boss. And I've also done it so that if a certain NPC is killed, then the boss would just simply surrender. Perhaps the boss has to be defeated in some sort of social test, and the combat is just the pretense or the framework to facilitate that skill challenge. Maybe the boss is hyper vulnerable to a certain spell type, certain type of technology, or perhaps they can only even be beaten at a certain time of year or under the certain alignment of stars or other celestial bodies. GMs, the number one key to running an absolute god tier villain is to give them several fatal flaws that can be learned by fighting them.
Today is Dragon Boat Festival, the one day in the year that I rest and do all my meditation to sustain energy.
An attentive player will hear that and be like, your villain can flat out give hints through dialogue, and that works especially well if your villain is talkative or braggadocio. And a tip for players, let the big bad evil guy talk. You know, because we've all been there. You finally see the villain, you think he's coming to fight, and what does he do?
He starts monologuing.
He starts monologuing.
Villains love to talk. Your GM loves to talk. Let him. Because who knows what the villain or the GM will let slip loose, you know? Attacking the villain before he can even talk is a lot like skipping the cutscenes, you know? Like, you can play that way, but you'll probably miss out a lot. And in a tabletop RPG, that information that you're missing might be the difference between life and death. So you can also use that villain's blabbing, you know, to ask your GM if you can get in better position. Like, well, you know, while this guy is talking, I want to circle around behind him, you know what I mean? Flaws can also reveal themselves naturally through the course of combat. And you can even, as a dungeon master, give this information out as a reward for certain quests. So sidebar, think about having a cooldown timer if your boss is going to be nearly invincible. If this were a campaign and the Lotus Chief is only vulnerable once per year, then failing to beat him means that the PCs have to wait an entire other year to take a shot at it. Now, in practice, being vulnerable only once per year is actually a vital flaw. That is the one time that they know that they can kill him. But in practice, it also serves as a cooldown timer. Systematically, a cooldown timer is really a penalty for failure, but narratively, it provides a compelling reason for your adventurers to just continue adventuring. And this is your time as a player to get stronger. And as a GM, you can let your PCs do that without it seeming nonsensical. You know, those situations where there's this world-ending threat, but your PCs are off doing side quests. Well, now that's no longer a problem because your PCs literally cannot beat the boss for a year, and they're going to need to get stronger for when that next year comes around so that they can face him. Cooldown timers are also a great way to punish failure without robbing your PCs of a chance to try again and eventually succeed. Yeah, they can try a task again, but they can't spam it because they'll have to wait however long they need to wait. Cooldown timers can be literally applied to any type of quest. Maybe the quest can only be undertaken on a certain holiday, or using rare ingredients that can only be harvested once per month or once per year. You know, maybe even once per decade if the quest is something 20th level. Adelante. Once your PCs have learned what fatal flaw to target, they have all the skills, all the feats, all the abilities they've collected by training and questing, and they've actually can contend with your boss, then now is the time to let them feel powerful. The very first time they land a real solid damaging blow on that big bad evil guy after all their toil, it should be a celebration. And GMs, do not get upset when your PCs get petty and try to humiliate your boss. Allow them to laugh and grief a little bit because they've earned it. Still, your boss should be tough to beat, and the PCs should be getting whooped even as they chip away at the boss. Targeting that fatal flaw, though, should dramatically shift the fight in the PC's favor. If you follow these steps as a player and as a GM, then I guarantee you that you'll be able to either fight and defeat or run an invincible boss that your group will be talking about for years to come. And after all the defeat, all that hard work, training, and adventuring, all of that just serves as the nice, slow buildup that leads to a very satisfying climax of this whole ordeal, which is the Coup de Grâce. This is your time to execute that fatality, and I mean go into detail about it and relish in it. And GMs, if your players don't just do this automatically, then prompt them. Let them be as bombastic as they can be, because you have forced them to earn this moment. But it's worthy to note in the film that the character actually beats the big bad evil guy by a lucky blow. I don't mind this because it's only his training and his growth through all of those defeats leading up to this fight that even allow him to be able to fight competently enough to begin with to contend with the Lotus Chief. So that brings me to my next point, which is actually the randomness of dice. If your players exploit a vital flaw and they're starting to roll well, if you've done this correctly, then it will be very possible for them to end your boss quickly. Maybe even just a round or two, depending on how many players you have. Don't be upset by this. If your boss goes down in just a round or two, because your PCs planned and they plotted and they also rolled a few crits, then you should reward that, because that means that they're playing your game well. And in a game, when you're playing well, you get rewarded. You know, that's consistent from all games, from Animal Crossing to Candy Crush to Call of Duty. So please do not cheat your players of their victory by fudging the numbers or making your boss unfairly immortal. If your players have toiled for that victory, been defeated over and over again, they've trained, they've learned, they've grown, they've done their research to exploit that boss's flaws, then finally stomping that boss into the ground, into the dirt, will not feel anticlimactic. it'll just feel sweet. But that is all that I have for you today, lords and ladies. Thank you so much for watching. Like the video, please, if you did like it, and subscribe if you feel so moved. People have been really asking me to come out with more of these videos, and I would love to. But the rate that I'm going, you know, it's because I gotta work, you know, I got a wife, kids. If you would like to support the channel and make it possible for me to come out with more content, then please go to the Patreon. That would be the absolute best way. And for less than a couple of Starbucks, you can support our channel, and I will be coming out with more content, more videos. And on that note, thank you to Mr. Bowden Darkblade, who is officially our first patron. Yeah. Thank you so much. It means a lot that you've come. Taking a chance on our channel, supporting us every month means the world. So if you too would like to support so that way we can actually come out with more of these tomes of knowledge, then please do visit the Patreon. And if you want to join my games, you want to play with me, or maybe you want to fight one of my invincible bosses, or you just want to see how I do things, if you want to experience the depth of what RPG can be, then I run games professionally on startplayinggames.com. Please do come on over and play with me. I'm running several campaigns right now that you can hop into if you would like to. The subscribers of this channel get a discount code. And outside of the games that I have listed, I run all sorts of games. You know, Dishonored RPG I've got here. I've got Cyberpunk Red, you know, I've got here that I run. I've got the Fallout RPG here that I run. I've got Dungeon Crawl Classics. Oh, Goodman Games, love you. I have Call of Cthulhu here, and even some going back, you know, back in the day. I got some Earth Dawn if you guys want to play that. Great system, as well as Classic Traveler and Ironsworn and a couple other games that I just can't even bring to mind right now. So if you want to play at all, then come find me and we'll do just that. We'll start playing. But let me cut it here and stop flapping my gums. Everybody stay safe, look after each other, and we'll see all of you in the next one.